All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. This is the November open office hours with Žiga, Branimir, and Tomaž. How you doing, everybody?
Not bad.
Very good.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. Good to hear. Good to hear. We're getting closer to the end of the year here. It's crazy to think that we only got one more month left of 2020, and we'll have had what? Did we have one every month of these? I can't even remember at this point. I think we did. Pretty close. Maybe not February, but we're getting there. So yeah, it's been a good year.
Yeah, it
So
must be. I think it is. I mean, it's like seventh, something like that already.
yeah, it's crazy. It goes by so fast. All right, let's roll into it. So let's see. Do we still expect main dish to be cooked and served this calendar year? Do we expect the weekly news to get more of a spotlight and the media machine to start up again? And now Kucoin is behind us. Yeah, and so I'm glad we don't have to say that name Kucoin anymore. We're kind of done that. So we're glad that's behind us at this point. So but so now that is it time to really get back on track? Not saying that the project's been off track at all, but as far as morale and I know the community's starting to get a little more back involved again too. And we also saw you joined the Substrate Builders program with Parity, and the reason I mixed that into this too is it seems that there was some information in there, maybe even benefiting from some of the media attention or the media avenues that Parity has available to them. So do you think it's so back to the main dish by end of year, is that feasible? Or but also are we going to start seeing more news now? We're going to start seeing more spotlight attention to the project.
Going straight to food.
That's right. It's not sushi, at least.
Yeah. I mean, we can when we talk about food, we can expect to read about the main dish this year. So shelling bombs around Christmas is doable. So about the main dish. Another thing about the news coming out and about the things going on, there's always a lot of things going on within OriginTrail ecosystem. Kucoin perhaps more that it impact the number of things going on or number of things that went out into public. I believe it more or less impacted what people see, because had been discussed very densely in all the discussion groups, even everything that was published through social channels via OriginTrail accounts was kind of put into the Kucoin hack context. And now that this matter has been somewhat resolved, or when it comes to OriginTrail's stolen tokens and the kind of the block on the withdrawals and deposits, this story is very much successfully completed for OriginTrail ecosystem participants. Now, of course, we believe that the news coming out, and which the news has been coming out with the same density, will get more attention now that we got rid of this problem. That you touched upon also some of the other things that are important for OriginTrail ecosystem, the exchanges. This is something, of course, as we have previously communicated, once the Kucoin hack has happened, liquidity has always been is being our strategic priority and will continue to be so. Of course, we need to be mindful here that even though the Kucoin hack has been a very much of a test for OriginTrail ecosystem, one of the good things that we have discovered was that OriginTrail is resilient. It's not dependent on one exchange. It's not dependent on one single actor in the entire universe. So whatever happens, the technology here is still working. Of course, we are all impacted. We all feel sorrow if something like that ever happens. But the main point being that OriginTrail is already resilient enough that it can not only withstand and endure all the enterprise use cases, everything that is about to come into the OriginTrail ecosystem, but it can also withstand such shocks. So perhaps this is partly providing answer to your question, which was quite extended. So if you could perhaps point out a few other things that I didn't provide answer, or if Branimir, Tomaž, you would compliment me, because there were a lot of questions put into one single bucket.
I mean, you pretty much answered the question, but I guess when we start talking about the exchange thing, it was kind of another question that came after this, so I'm just going to meld it into this question now too. Is that we saw through Kucoin hack that some projects really showed their cards, right, about decentralization and centralization. And ironically enough, some of the projects that look like they were very quick to do these token swaps to show that they're not that decentralized, Kucoin magically found a lot of these funds. They came back to them somehow. So now we're seeing some projects that, because they did the token swap and they were able to put halts in their contracts and they were so centralized, it's now coming back to bite them in the community, because now they have all these other tokens that came back, and they have these new tokens that they minted, and now it's a mess where you held the ODN, and the track token being so decentralized was able to hold its ground off and say that we can't swap, but you ended up the track token ended up benefiting the most in the end because of that. And I think that shows the strength of what you were saying about the decentralized aspect of it. I guess the other question, as far as still speaking to this, is, has there been a lot of I know you can't say much about it to specifics or anything like that, but has there been some significant progress in the hunt for more liquidity and centralized exchanges now that KuCoin is behind us? And the reason I brought Parity up in the last one is because it does kind of relate to this too, because I would think with the street credibility that Parity has, it gives, and now working so closely with Parity, it gives you a lot more credibility as a team yourself working with a team like them. So that's why I know it sounds like a lot of questions, but they are kind of combined in that sense where, is there been more effort on the exchange front, at least from a positive standpoint, even if you can't share much, and has Parity been part of that, been able to help that? And I guess even speaking to what recently happened, showing how decentralized the token is, has that helped as well?
Yeah, what is important here is that we have always based our development on 3 core values: neutrality, inclusiveness, and usability. And for us, not doing any monkey business when it came to KuCoin hack was very much a straightforward kind of decision, not to do what many others have decided. Some 60% of projects actually decided to do a token swap, which goes directly against decentralization. And it was actually not our decision. What we did post KuCoin hack was we kept on building, we kept on doing things that were based on very solid values. And of course, because that actually got noticeable. So what KuCoin hack provided was a kind of a light, which pointed out how much more resilient OriginTrail is. And this, of course, has helped us build up the street credibility we now have, which is also very much important when it comes to talking to additional exchanges. And the team post KuCoin hack, when this liquidity issue has been even more apparent, has done everything. So we have exposed the OriginTrail case with the help of and also with the help of some other partners that we work with to the most important exchanges. That said, this is kind of it's not a sprint. It's when it comes to certain exchanges, sometimes it's a marathon. And what we can all do here, what we can do as a community together, is to also appeal to some of those exchanges that we all feel are kind of the most important targets for the OriginTrail ecosystem. And this is something that every single community member can be the judge of, which exchange he or she would like to see OriginTrail to be listed at. They can simply appeal and ask those exchanges when are they going to support the Trace token. Because exchanges, yes, in the past, some of the exchanges were charging high fees, and I believe some of them still do so. Whereas the most legitimate exchanges, they always rely on the opinion of communities and the sentiment of the communities around specific technologies. And the biggest moves we believe can now be done in company with the community, appealing to all the important exchanges to continue considering and eventually to list Trace token. But that said, what has happened to KuCoin, what has happened with the KuCoin hack, and our immediate response, it provided a lot of street credibility, which we can now consider as a capital going forward in order to achieve these goals.
So has any of the parity relationship, though, has that increased any of what you feel is chances to get on some of these more tier
I
one
mean, certainly,
exchanges?
all these things, including Parity, including the development plans we have, we touched upon the main dish very briefly. The main dish is a culmination of everything that we have done in past years. More specifically, some of the developments in the last year and a half, and all of these things are done in a concert. So the liquidity provisioning game is in no way split from other developments within the OriginTrail ecosystem, more technical developments. So all of this is catalyzing also our way towards entering new markets. And Parity and the likes, of course, are always very useful partners also when it comes to getting introduced to some of the decision makers in the space.
Yeah, and it's funny because I even saw the other day, I've been seeing now Oracle tweeting out a lot about the project. And so to have Oracle representatives and some big people up in Oracle tweeting about the project, it seems like that's that perfect element that you need to gain that legitimacy for these US exchanges. Because you said it yourself, Žiga, legitimate exchanges don't charge for listings. Actually, in the United States, it's illegal to even charge for a listing. They rely on, is it a real project? Is it, are there corporations using this? Is this gonna, does it have utility? And you have all that. And so like, even like I said, just having Oracle tweeting information out. So I'm hoping these type of things really can, for the Krakens or the Geminis of the world or whoever, that they see this stuff and realize that this is a project truly worth listing based on, the adoption and the use cases that we're seeing out there.
Right. I mean, the time is on our side. We have an apparent utility to the Trace token. The utility, we see that this is something that can only be expanded in the future. So the time is on our side. The value will always be accumulating within the OriginTrail ecosystem. And you're right when you're pointing out the partners, the likes of Oracle and BSI. We have a very kind of intimate relationship with the most important decision makers in both and some others in some other partnership networks. And this is a very, very good basis to build on. And this is where OriginTrail is not a company. OriginTrail is an ecosystem, as we pointed out in the white paper. And this is only becoming apparent in the last year. As you've seen, we launched solutions together with the BSI, now with Oracle. And now we actually see in this period, in this last quarter, and also the previous Q3 period, is that we see other companies, the likes of Oracle, the likes of BSI, also the likes of the non-governmental organizations such as GS1 actively pitching GS1 OriginTrail solutions. And I'm very, very curious if there is any other project apart from Ethereum or perhaps Bitcoin, which is gaining such attraction in mainstream. And this is also our goal. So liquidity provisioning, if I touch upon exchanges again, it's not a goal in itself. It's a means towards being more successful to the mainstream adoption. And we consider OriginTrail as one of top 10 most successful ecosystems within the entire crypto space when it comes to appealing and pitching to the mainstream enterprise users. I think there is no doubt about that OriginTrail is second to none when it comes to that. And thank you for pointing that out. That's a very important point, Jason.
Great. Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I don't see anybody out there with Oracle telling them that they're building solutions with them. So
and even
I mean,
pinning the post on Twitter. That's it doesn't get any better than this.
Heck yeah, man. All right, we're gonna jump to some node questions. Just it's probably gonna be more from Branimir. Let's see. Some of us noticed that disk space usage on our nodes increasing even though the node didn't win any jobs. Are nodes storing all jobs or just the ones that we win and bid on? What is causing the disk space to fill up if each job only is a few kilobytes? And I think I remember you at one point stating that the nodes do carry some sort of data over in relation to the whole database. So is there anything you can speak to from that from a storage perspective?
Sure. I'll try to make it simple and short. So essentially, you have to always think that OriginTrail is there to host a decentralized knowledge graph. And this decentralized knowledge graph having a public sort of spine, a public graph, which everybody hosts to a certain degree. And then some of the nodes, some of the participants in the network get to be the gatekeepers, the vaults of this data. So the ones that get actually incentivized, which means that they are responsible for providing accessibility to this data, but that also doesn't exclude others. So other nodes, by default, are going to keep this data as well, because it's in their, the assumption is that it is within their interest to keep this data, because the data is inherently valuable. Now, that's not to say that a certain node cannot remove this, because they're not, there's not a protocol implemented mechanism that requires them to keep this. But by default, if you installed your node, if you didn't do any custom tweaking or really barely any, your node will keep the data that it catches on the network, let's say it like that, because of this assumption. Yes, the assumption that this is worthwhile keeping. So in that sense, one of the things that's in the development roadmap is to improve the user experience of managing the node from this aspect, so that the data is actually something you can, that the life cycle of this data is something that you can better manage as a node runner. And that's something that's coming up. It's actually within the development roadmap that at least in the team internally is forming. And in that sense, short answer is yes. Whenever there's a new job on the network and your node catches it, it actually catches it in order to be able to participate in it. So it has to store this data. The only thing that it doesn't do later, if by default, it doesn't remove it, which can be set. So that's a very short answer. That assumes that the growing of the data stored is going to be at the rate of the data incoming to the network, or
And I assume
offers.
And I assume this is what helps the litigation process out, right? Because soon as the litigation takes place, the node already is privy to the data that's there. They're not trying to, you isolate any incident where 3 nodes go down that were holding the data, for example, and all of a sudden then you have no data. So even if 3 nodes went down, based off what you said, that litigation still can happen properly, and still other 3 nodes could get their data.
Absolutely. So it's about availability, really. And in terms of having the 3 so-called gatekeepers, like we said just now, the idea behind litigation there is that if one of them goes out completely, that there's someone who can take their place. And that means that these initial nodes that weren't incentivized for this particular task, they get the opportunity to be selected to keep this data. But essentially, the whole point is enabling a protocol level mechanism that allows certain guarantees for data availability. And that's why the more nodes within the network hold the data, the more availability essentially we have, or less unavailability.
Right. Great. And I'm sticking with you a little bit here, Branimir, because going into this next question, and when we talk about availability, so we all saw this big Infura outage that happened last week, right? Where Ethereum did I believe it did a hard fork by applying a patch that was supposed to prevent the hard fork. So, and what this question is basically asking is, are we too reliant on Infura? Does it make it less decentralized? And, when you have an outage like that, I mean, I'm sure I have no percentage of what went out, but if I had to guess, I'd say 80% of our projects, even more, are using Infura out there. They're not running their own Ethereum nodes. Maybe some of the bigger projects are running their own nodes, but do we see that as a weak point for Ethereum? And I'll even add this to the Starfleet chain. This would be a non-issue on, because obviously we're not relying upon Infura to have its own validators on the network. But do you see Ethereum as it is not being decentralized enough because of this Infura dependency?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a two-pronged question. On one hand, the Ethereum code base, when you think of the update that happened, it was a bit of an unlucky update. I understand the way it happened. It turns out some people saw that as sort of hard fork that happened behind the curtain. But it was, being an engineer, I understand the pain of the Ethereum developers. It's really not so easy to, it's easy to assume everything's running perfectly, and then you can realize, oh, there's a bug that's been here dormant for 2 years, and we need to fix it soon. And then in this fix process, normally that breaks something you've already been working on, and you shift your attention, and then, I mean, working on it can cause an issue. And so from the perspective of Ethereum, I would see that in terms of development, it's a bit tricky that this can happen from the perspective of being built by very few people. But on the other hand, what Infura does is really just provides a gateway service. And the issue is that people are relying, so the Ethereum network was fine because the fork that happened ended up being a minority chain, and everything went smoothly. So in terms of how decentralized Ethereum is, I would say pretty much it is. It's not a problem from the Ethereum side. The problem is we're all using this window into Ethereum, which is called Infura, which managed to end up on the minority chain. And all of a sudden there was, consensus was not achieved because we had 2 chains and people had different views inside it. So from the perspective of Ethereum, there's been many more services popping up like Infura that are offering the service because there's obviously a market for it. And specifically from the perspective of ODN, the ODN, again, like Ethereum, is the technology itself is not impacted. The network, as long as the nodes have the ability to interact with another network, are not an issue. The issue is if everybody is sort of by design stuck to one window, to one RPC endpoint, which it is not. So Ethereum, the OriginTrail, the technology provides the ability to set any RPC endpoint. What though it could provide further, and that's also within the development roadmap, is that you can set a fallback RPC endpoint. So the idea is that if you currently can set one, that can be your Ethereum node, that can be Infura node, any other service. There are others, like I said. But the thing there being is ideally you can set a couple. And then if some goes down, you can rely that, you at least have much more availability. But that's something on the team. The team is going to be working on building this feature that we can have multiple RPC endpoints. What's on the side of the node runners in the community is to actually enable this and set it up. And that's a step that's going to be happening. So
and
yeah,
I guess,
go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, I think the same thing could be said for even hosting providers, right? And this goes for any project. Like for instance, if DigitalOcean went down, you'd probably lose 80% of the nodes out there from the community group. I'm just saying, it's one of the best platforms out there. But once the node clustering comes out, that's going to be kind of a non-issue, right? Because you could have a node running on DigitalOcean, you could have a node running on Vultr, for example. And if one goes down, then you have that that failover capability. And even we're seeing some projects out there that look ambitious, but like the ones that share trusted compute resources, like I believe IExec RLC, for example, or something like along those lines, where at some point you're probably going to see these decentralized node structures where they're borrowing compute power, maybe from AWS, from Google, from the different cloud providers, and pooling them together. That way, if AWS goes down, we're still pooling resources from other providers. And so we're going to have that uptime. And I think this is baby steps, right? Decentralization is not going to be solved in one day. You can only make it better over time, but it's not going to be 100% today, right? Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. And it's I would go ahead and add that it's a much harder sport because you would normally see let's say centralized services develop, and they adopt distributed systems in terms, so they provide high availability, like something like Facebook or Twitter, but they're still, and the coordination problem is much smaller because that's within one company, within the same entity, and then when you have a network that's permissionless, that anybody can join at any time, leave, run nodes on all kinds of infrastructure, not controlled by single entity, then this is harder sport. And it has to be, I would say, taken. You have to take additional elements into consideration, which makes you a little less fast. And also the system has more inertia because it's bigger. If you roll out an update, it's not going to be rolled out in like a minute on the whole infrastructure you control. You don't control it. It's going to roll out eventually. So you have to sort of take care of these eventualities. And it's also a degree harder problem, not just because of that, but because you're trying to make sure that there is no one centralized component in the system. So in that way, we are losing in on a lot of optimizations that a centralized system can do.
Mm-hmm.
So I would totally agree with you. There's going to be a lot of evolution coming out, and it's probably going to go very much into microservice architecture. So like you said, your node, you can envision a node of Ethereum or a node of OriginTrail in the future running at a couple of different data centers and potentially even a machine that you own somewhere, and that these services logically don't understand that they're in different places. They're just services working together. Whoever is interested in such a system can look up microservice architecture. That's all the rage in the last decade or two in the distributed system world. And that's what really making the high availability node is about. We're splitting up the node into microservices and enabling them to work together. So sort of as chunks of functionality in different places around the world. So then you can have copies of them, and then anyone running out or just for some reason stopping or being unavailable doesn't change anything. So that will increase the resilience of the network significantly.
Yeah, and go on.
Finally, when you think of the context between such systems, so you're not talking about one decentralized network, which is already a hard problem, but you have multiple, and they have to interface through bridges or through gateways. Then you get an additional element. That's why what you mentioned around Starfleet, what's really important is that the RPC issue is effectively handled. And that's why in the architecture, if you go and look into the RFC for Starfleet, you will see that there is an envisioned RPC service at the beginning that would be provided by the core developers, but not the only one. And the idea would be that there would be multiple places you can look through into the chain, let's say, as RPC service. And sorry, I interrupted you. You wanted to jump in.
Oh no, I was just kind of somewhat closing it out with the fact that people scream like, is this decentralized enough about projects? But most of these things we're talking about are far more decentralized than most of the apps they're using on their phone today. So even though we may not see the light at the end of the tunnel for 100% decentralization, we're still even a heck of a lot better at 10% than being at 0% today. And I think that's just something people have to not lose,
It is a gradient. It's not a 0 to 1 situation. It's everything in between is also, well, it's degrees of decentralization. But also what I wanted to mention is degrees of privacy as well. That's one thing that, for example, ODN is trying to reach very, very much within every single development is not only the privacy of the data, but also how you utilize it. And thinking of that's also another hard problem. But effectively, it's something that centralized services tend to avoid. So you would, because that's where the value is generated at aggregating and understanding the data that you as a consumer produce on Facebook or such places. And what they end up doing is really making a knowledge graph behind it and trying to analyze it with complex and advanced algorithms, and then think of it as in the future, you being able to do this, you having this functionality of the knowledge graph within different places, potentially within your phone, and you being the owner of this. So the privacy aspect is also a very key thing, because if you don't build it from the get-go, it quickly turns out being pretty much the same situation that we have now with the social media.
Exactly. It has to be privacy by design, not designed and then, hey, let's throw some privacy into it later on. That's the big difference. All right. I'm going to guess this one's for Tomaž. I know Tomaž feels left out sometimes when we start him up. And every time I see pharma, I usually just think, I don't know why, I think Tomaž. I picture him with a lab coat on or something working in a pharmacy. But the pharma use case has been on the Trace Labs website for a while now and says coming soon. Has there been any updates on the use case for the ODN that can be shared? Even saw some recent references to OriginTrail being part of the Mediledger pilot. Is there anything to share there as well? And it's been on there for a while. Pharma, it's always been that coming soon line, right? And so it seems like with everything that's going on with DCSA, we see it and we talk about it all the time, right? But it's just more and more now. We're seeing the need for this get pushed out, and it seems like it's kind of like a shit or get off the toilet for a lot of these companies right now to for lack of a better term, to abide by these rules and regulations. So are we going to start seeing some pharma cases soon? Is there anything you can even share there? And again, I keep seeing OriginTrail popping up in these research papers with like Mediledger. So that's why I've got a lot of people all like excited when they see that FDA pilot. But is there any association there?
Yeah, I think it might be the glasses, which I'm lacking today. So there you go. I'm
Dr. Tomaž.
Dr. Tom, yeah. Well, my mom would be happy. I'll give you that if there'd be a doctor in front of me.
Forget those decentralized networks. Do pharmaceuticals.
But pharma is an interesting industry nonetheless, right? So we've definitely we're seeing an uptake in activity, and I think we've kind of mentioned briefly also in the previous discussion that we've had that's happening. Kind of whether that's being pushed by the regulation, whether it's being pushed by different business values that these companies are seeing from having a greater visibility across their supply chains, whether it's different multi-organizational settings that are happening where you have like a combination of different sometimes even non-governmental governmental companies. So a lot of interesting things happening within the pharmaceutical industry, because it spreads out just so much, and we're definitely seeing an uptick in activity around there. But it's always like with everything else that we communicate, it has to be live, and it has to be communicated from both sides, obviously. So it's never just us putting something out. It's always done with a partner that we're working on, and it's similar. In this case, as we'll reach the maturity where we can and are able to speak more about it, then we'll definitely present this in a form where also the community can be introduced to what's going on, and kind of the some of the cases that might reach that type of level of maturity that we can share about it. And beyond that point, we see a lot of OriginTrail getting picked up by different communities, which are beyond being an open source project and an ecosystem. It has to, and it does get wider than just the team at Trace Labs as the core developers, or as those driving the use cases. So we're excited to see that the name and the technology is getting introduced in different projects in different communities globally, so that's kind of the whole idea, right, of the ecosystem is to have those things happen as often as you can. Be present in multiple communities that can drive the adoption of the technology outside of direct influence of the core developers. So we're very excited to see more of that happening in the future, including the pharma industry. I don't know if Žiga, Brana, you want to add anything if I missed that?
Yeah, I think you covered everything that you are allowed to cover. Sometimes we cannot.
Like a lawyer. Just keep throwing around.
No,
NDA.
It's obvious that it's quite obvious that we have been in contact with a few very interesting firms for a while, and whatever is going to be communicated publicly is going to be communicated by them directly. There are some very interesting things going on, definitely.
And I know from from a community standpoint, right? It's nothing more frustrating than knowing the potential of the ODN and what it can do. And in relations with GS1 Digital Link and what the fuck, we're seeing these real problems out there. Are like, I wish we had a solution. And here we are, we see this car driving down the road with square wheels, and we're literally holding 4 round wheels in our hands, and we're saying, hey, look, if you just put these on, everything's solved. And it's like, oh yeah, we'll get there. So that's why from a community standpoint, it's like you want to scream on the top of a mountain somewhere and be like, why aren't you looking? Why aren't you paying attention? Everything you keep asking for is right here. But again, we know a lot of this stuff probably is happening behind the scenes, and there is a lot of like NDA type stuff that goes on. But I just hope you guys know from a community standpoint why you're probably getting inundated with these annoying repetitive questions, just because people are excited, people are ready, people want to see it, they know it's coming, and they know you can't say anything, but it's driving people absolutely crazy that they have to keep waiting.
Yeah, the frustrations a lot of times is on both sides, and but on the other hand, there's definitely a process to everything, and even if you are kind of showcasing the value that it can come, you have to follow certain steps to make it happen, especially when we're talking about a larger either ecosystems or companies or corporates or enterprises. It's just there's a process to everything, and kind of we have to make sure that we don't make a procedural mistake that then hinders the or hampers the possibility of the technology getting better adoption in the future. So for us, it's always the long game is always, well, in the long term pays out better, but sometimes it can get a little bit frustrating. I'll give you that as well.
And I just kid with you guys, and we get it. Anybody gets that. I mean, what would you rather have? The ODN be adopted and be the next Google for supply chains, or just have a team tell you what they're working on and then nothing gets, nothing can go forward because of it. So, so we get it, guys, but we're excited. I know you're excited. So you're probably more frustrated than we are about being able to tell what you're working on. Look at Branimir smiling ear to ear right now. He just wants to say something, but he can't. All right, I'm gonna go on to this next question. Actually, I don't know which one of you guys wants to take this one, but out of the 2 NGI projects, so we got openPKG and we got the NGI Atlantic project, which one of these do you see requiring more work from the team to onboard to the ODN, and which will bring more jobs to the network? Now, I'm going to go on a limb here, and I'm going to say the NGI Atlantic stuff's a lot easier to just get up and running and have people upload data, because it could be something even like weather data, for example. I'm going to assume the openPKG stuff is a little more tough to get people on board with, because you're literally changing the whole way that they bring themselves into some of these environments out there. So before you're openPKG, you're almost trying to replace the LinkedIn and the Facebooks of the world by using that as a login means for certain types of platforms. So I'm going to say that must be a harder nut to crack to get companies onboarded with than the NGI Atlantic stuff. But I could be wrong. So can you speak to between both of them, and where do you see the progress going with both of those, and what we can at least maybe see benefits of first from which project?
openPKG allowing for better transparency in handling of personal data is something which is becoming a necessity, not only because companies are recognizing this, individuals are recognizing this, but also regulators are recognizing this. And openPKG it was designed very much in line with the currently existing legislation in the European Union, the GDPR, and also with the upcoming regulation in the US, and also with some of the frameworks like Privacy Shield that not only European companies are following, but also any company in the world would check the Privacy Shield website. US companies, Asian companies, whichever company selling products, services, setting up websites and inviting European consumers. So the regulation is here. The doors towards adoption are open. The market itself, it's not just the market about handling personal data, it's also the market of, it's the data economy in general, which encompasses several trillion US dollars. So there's a lot of chips to be taken from this field. Of course, openPKG as a product most probably it will not be named openPKG, because let's face it, the name really sucks. It's the name that, you know, it's kind of the inaugural name in order to have some name for a product. But definitely it will go through several iterations. And what's important here, and I believe one of the questions is also touching upon that, is that we already have partners which are going to be helping Trace Labs in deploying and testing and also iterating on the solution itself, so that we can get validation from day one once we release the first minimum viable product, which will be handled by the professionals from this industry, people handling professional services within the British Standards Institution that have a necessary expertise from the field of preserving personal data according to the GDPR and other legislation. Data marketplace is, in our opinion, one of the most promising concepts, framework that is here not only to allow companies, enterprises, also individuals to monetize their data, and prior to that also structure data according to certain standards so that it can be monetizable, because data itself, it can also be, you know, not very much valuable, a bad data if it's not structured, if the integrity property is not added to it. So all these things are also within the goals of the data marketplace, being the Atlantic project, so the food data marketplace extension from the Ledger, laboratory data marketplace, which has also gotten into commercialization phase within the Block IS initiative. So all these things within the data marketplace domain are promising a lot, not only to the companies, but also to the OriginTrail ecosystem as such, because we're beginning to get a sense of the added utility which might come from incentivizing stakeholders to use OriginTrail for data economy. And of course, as this comes to fruition, we might have some very good things going on in the months going forward. So it's very difficult to kind of pick between the two. Both kind of product directions are tackling very enormous industries, and I would even say that they are kind of complementary, that they have some very cool synergistic effects. And it would be in our interest as Trace Labs and also as core developers of OriginTrail to make sure that both product lines develop towards a specific shelling point, so that we get this cross-pollinating effect. So both marketplace and the preservation of personal data as such.
Yeah, both of them sound crazy exciting. OpenPKG does kind of sound like something that you have done at the hospital. So I can agree with changing the name of that. Maybe it sounds like a procedure, but I can't wait to see. I know my thing with data marketplace, again, I'm going to get a little selfish here for a second. I keep seeing all this stuff about Ocean Protocol and out there, right? And I don't know anything about Ocean Protocol, so I'm not knocking the project at all or anything. So don't anybody listen from Ocean or something. This is just me not understanding. But I have to assume that the OriginTrail data marketplace, with the different partners that you're working with the governments that you're working with, probably has a more a use case that we could see happen sooner than something like some of these other projects where I'm not even sure if they're fully decentralized yet. I think they were actually one of the projects, if I remember right, that was able to swap the token because they halted their contract on Kucoin. So when we see these projects getting all this media attention out here for data marketplaces, I'm going to assume that we're going to see the OriginTrail data marketplace sooner rather than later. Is that correct? I mean, you said maybe in the next few months or so we could see some use cases come out of it. I know you can't promise anything, but it's just, I mean, it feels a lot more ready than some of these other projects we're seeing out there that think it's cool or have a good white paper, but we haven't seen much of yet.
Yeah, OriginTrail within the first white paper was designed with having the problem of bad data in our minds. So there are three properties of bad data. First, bad data is unstructured. Secondly, bad data lacks integrity. And third, bad data is poorly accessible. So all those three aspects we believe needed to be solved before we can start thinking about monetizing data. And the OriginTrail that we see right now is very much successfully tackling the problem of bad data. And this is showing some very positive consequences within the enterprise sectors. We have seen several of the solutions, some of them tackling industries and sectors encompassing also as much as 40% of the US imports. So it's a huge footprint that OriginTrail can leave there with respect to tackling the bad data issue. Now, when we have this bad data issue solved, the next logical step, individuals, companies also to monetize data and also to deliver an infrastructure, set of tools, and also the network itself, which is capable of helping individuals to get included into the future data economies and actually take some of the value away from the bigger companies, because nowadays bigger companies only are able to monetize data. So the future, we believe is in allowing more equitable equitable value extraction from the data economy, which means that each individual potentially can be incentivized and potentially earn something out of it. But the main point is that there is no successful data marketplace without solving the problem of bad data. And again, OriginTrail is the only project that has tackled successfully the problem of bad data first. So tackle the problem of poorly structured data, poorly accessible data, poor integrity of data. And now that marketplaces, several verticals of marketplaces that we're tackling are coming to fruition, something like you mentioned also makes a lot of sense. And looking at the underlying token within the OriginTrail ecosystem, this might also provide us some very good basis for the future development and the future roadmaps within the OriginTrail. And this is where perhaps Branimir and Tomaž would also want to add a few things from their perspectives. But the short answer is yes, data marketplaces are very promising. I checked what Ocean Protocol is doing, and I like the plans. I really like reading what other projects are planning or have done to an extent, and it's always very useful to see where the industry is right now. That said, looking at what we have done, looking what the oracles are showing, BSI showing, and other partners are showing, it's pretty obvious that OriginTrail ecosystem is 2 years ahead of the sector, and we have a very good launch pad to build from here.
Tomaž, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, just and I second Žiga's thoughts on, and kind of we're obviously looking at what's happening within the industry as a whole. Not necessarily even just the data projects, also more openly within the crypto sphere. And a lot of I guess the difference, or the major difference that we see, or where we have really the 2-year advantage clearly is that we're coming from getting our hands dirty and having that hands-on experience as to how to approach different really concrete challenges that businesses are having, and kind of utilizing this type of technology to address them, which was the bad data examples that Žiga was saying, and working our way from there towards then augmenting that with the data marketplaces, rather than coming from vice versa, where you would kind of try to create a marketplace just for a data, but then kind of knowing the ins and outs a little bit of how usually these data exchange is working. It's not really the problem of enterprise today that the data doesn't exist. They have it. It's just all the problems of the bad data is why they cannot exchange it very efficiently.
The silos aren't the issue.
Yeah, so then you have to solve that, and then you give them a chance to really make it better and more efficient by having the data marketplace, because you give them motivation to share, right? So you then you really get the ball rolling, and you don't have the friction. It's like you would need a screw, but you'd be buying a block of iron, and you still have to make the screw out of the iron. Of course, that's very tedious, right? So you'd rather have just make the screws and then sell the screws, because that's what really the people might be needing on the other hand. So that's maybe just some thoughts on kind of how we approach it or have approached it over the course of the last couple of years, and where really data marketplace makes a huge role. And it's something that we've been working on as well for quite a while. I mean, the Ledger project, the first kind of more concrete dive into the data marketplace was almost a year ago, right? So that's like there's been a lot of components that were done in the course of this time that are key in how you can leverage OriginTrail's knowledge graph into a data marketplace. So this is definitely not something that is a spur of the moment or something like that. It's a moving from bad data challenges towards being able to valorize and exchange value on that is something that's been definitely a focus for a while. And yeah, it's good to kind of get a little bit of momentum around the topic because it also raises the legitimacy and kind of helps you do some of the other stuff. But yeah, all in all, I agree with also the comments that Žiga made, and it's exciting. Both projects are exciting, and both are very moving in the similar direction at the end of the day.
Awesome. Can't wait to see some of that data start pouring through. That's when it's gonna really feel real for us node runners, and seeing that data get shared between the whole network, and so that's gonna be the aha moment, I think, for a lot of people who aren't even running nodes yet, maybe to say, wow, this is the real deal. This isn't just like some white paper thing that's going on, it's actually being used. So I gotta do a better job of this, answering questions from the chat. Sometimes I try to do it as well as I can, but when SFC, testnet, and mainnet, I don't know why it's hard to say. Do we have any ideas about when we might be able to see Starfleet chain, maybe testnet popping up, and any idea? I mean, if we don't know testnet yet, we certainly won't know mainnet, but anything we can add to that? Or?
Yeah, maybe that's the best question for me to address. So on the progress of Starfleet, we've actually done quite a lot of the most important stuff, which is really the preparation and planning. So whenever you're building some system like this, you better invest, well, 80% of your time if you can planning, and then 20% of time building can be actually possible because you planned out well. And one of the first steps is obviously been done with the Trace Alliance Working Group, actually the task for Starfleet. So the specifications that are out, we are close to deciding upon a few dilemmas that were introduced with the paper. The most important of which would be the implementation direction. So if you've read the RFC, you would have seen that there's the Ethereum direction and the substrate direction. And currently it's looking very much like substrate, though it's not a final decision yet. So we're looking at it, and there's discussion among both task forces, both for the Polkadot task force and the Starfleet. Having that said, the implementation of the first, and we call it the TRL 5, actually TRL 5 testnet, which would be the first testnet that would not be within the development environment of the OriginTrail core developers, was planned by the end of the year. So it's a tight schedule, but it's we are still confident that we can pull it through, though we cannot really promise it. So around the end of the year, we expect to have the first testnet that the node can connect to. Currently, there's being a lot of work done on the side of making the ODN node capable of speaking with multiple chains in a production-ready manner, and this has been already in the works for over a month, almost month and a half now. Strictly in development, speaking in terms of planning, it's been longer than that. So essentially, that's the first step to go, and then after that, it makes sense to first we're going to run an internal lab testnet that the nodes would connect to and work with. And then the second step would be running the TRL5 or Technology Readiness Level 5 testnet, which is in the relevant environment, which we will invite everyone to join in. And when it comes to mainnet, we, through the whole testing period, we essentially have a certain number of acceptance criteria that need to be reached. So in order to reach these acceptance criteria, we cannot really promise a time. Like we cannot say, okay, it takes like a month to do this. But we are confident that the more testing we do and the earlier we do it in phases, and we're actually doing the first phases already when it comes to the node particularly, then that shouldn't be too far away from the testnet. So if we have done our homework well, planned well, and if we deploy and the testnet shows working, everything working fine, then the mainnet can follow, well, the mainnet launch can follow relatively quickly after that. That is
That's
the
exciting.
best I can say right now.
Well, what's exciting is you're basically saying the logic and the science behind it is 80% of the battle. It's not so much the building, it's getting the logic behind it. And it sounds like you've got a lot of the logic already kind of fleshed out. It's more just sealing up those last few leaks and then deciding which path you want to go and then put it out there. So
yeah, think of it as building I don't know, what would that be in English? A sort of a house that you can build out of prefabricated parts. So first you need to plan what type of house you're going to build, what's all the installations you need to get in there, get all these parts, and that basically all of this planning. And then when you start, you basically do the Lego, and that's really 20% of it. And obviously
it's harder to design out the Lego project, but once you design it out, you put the Legos in and you put it together. So
yeah.
That's awesome. Oh man, I'm excited. I can't wait. I feel like this is going to be a good Christmas, or I don't know, well, some stuff Valentine's Day, but it's exciting. So I think a lot of us are super pumped for that. So someone put, what is Branimir's IQ? I don't even know who asked that or why you would ask that. Is there anything you want to share there, Branimir? Is anything on the ODN that we can verify to make sure it is what you say it is?
I don't know. I haven't done a test ever. I don't know what's a good number. Maybe 42.
Yeah, I haven't done one either. I'm afraid it would come back with, and they wouldn't let me out in public or something. So, does OriginTrail have plans to expand its presence in Asia or Southeast Asia? And if I remember correctly, a lot of this work you guys did was over in the Asia continent originally. With I remember. I forget the name, but is it Simji or something like that? Where one of the first projects I remember you did when you had those green shirts with like the tree on it, and but you already had a big footprint over there, right?
OriginTrail through Trace Labs, which is active in that part, is covering the entire globe, and also some of the projects also involve Asian importers to the US. It's like several thousands of them. So OriginTrail right now is global, yet we try to cover, the entire kind of spectrum of different companies coming from different parts of the globe, from the mostly predominantly European Central. In the future, though, we are looking to expand to most probably to the US in some ways, and maintain our presence in Asia. It's very difficult to say when exactly we will also have people present in those continents. Perhaps in the future with this COVID situation, we might even base ourselves from multiple parts of the world just because of this situation we're in. But the point is, we are already doing things more or less on every continent.
I'm actually starting to see now. It's funny when earlier this year, when we talked about U.S. adoption, I've always been, I haven't been very excited about it because it seemed like the EU has been so far ahead of what the United States has been doing. But in the last few months, from what I've been seeing, there's been a lot of, oh shit, we got to hurry up and start getting on this type stuff coming out of the U.S. So I think we're going to see, you talk about, even just takes time for things to bake. I have a feeling the U.S. is already kind of in an oh crap moment. Like we gotta start getting on board with this. So I think we're going to see over the next few months, like 0 to 100. You talk about sprints. I think we're going to see a lot of these companies getting on board, especially now you're seeing PayPal offering Bitcoin. I mean, that's your first big entry into what's legitimizing a lot of cryptocurrencies. And we'll put the tech aside for a second. Once you get people on board with at least the idea of these fake virtual currencies or whatever are here. They're real. They're here to stay. This is how you incentivize a lot of these projects. I think it's going to be very quick when you start seeing the technology start getting adopted with that as well. So it's good to see that I'm finally feeling as a U.S. resident for once that my country's starting to get the idea, and we're starting to see all this progression happen. Have you seen some U.S., at least from your side too, have you seen a lot of more U.S. interest in any U.S.-based companies, or is it still kind of
yeah, US is I mean, apart from the things we do here back at our home yard in Europe, US is the next in line, or perhaps even at par. I think the fundamentals and the values that we instill through the OriginTrail ecosystem have no passport. They can either be exported to the places that kind of are in line, in tune with these fundamentals of, let's say, respecting privacy or respecting personal data, the values of neutrality, the values of non-interference from companies, from centralized actors. And that said, not all parts of the world share the same values. So in some ways, some of the Asian countries, and we don't need to point fingers because it might be very obvious which countries these are not very much in favor of privacy preserving technologies and privacy by design and government non-interference. So we are very much global. At the same time, values that we are standing on are they have no passport. But in some countries, actors might be more susceptible to what we have to offer than the others. And US, Europe definitely are kind of leading the charge here.
And what's good is because a lot of these companies are so decentralized, like Oracle. Oracle has offices everywhere. So I'm sure once they say, hey, Oracle Slovenia gets it, Oracle Europe gets it, why aren't we doing this at Oracle United States? And it's pretty easy at that point for the company to kind of replicate what's happening over this, over the river and bring it back home because they've already kind of had that testing bed over there. So it's less scary to kind of jump into.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We actually have offices in Slovenia in the same building as Oracle. And we actually see the other Oracle members from other countries more often now working from home than we do the kind of the Slovenian colleagues working from the same office. But from what we heard, also Oracle, as the same as other companies, are now all working from home. So they're not even allowed to pick up their stuff from the offices unless they get some sort of justification for that. So it's all very much decentralized nowadays. As you pointed out, also the oracles and the likes of oracles are accepting these kind of principles.
Great. And talking about big companies, I saw a nice little article come out the other day with Tomaž in it. When I saw there were some heavy hitters in there. We saw Pepsi talking, we saw IBM, we saw Nestle, we saw McCormick. How does it feel to be in a document talking about blockchain, adoption and future of blockchain, and you're beside these heavy hitters of these big Fortune 500 companies? What's that like? I mean, that's got to mean something, right? It means you guys are doing something right if you're alongside titans like that.
Appropriate for the OriginTrail ecosystem, I guess. But no, I mean, joking aside, it's a great exposure, and it also shows in a way the potential and the outreach of some of the projects that we're involved with in terms of the consortium projects in Europe. So the food safety market, obviously, we wrote a lot about that. There's already, as a part of the consortia, there's some big companies involved, but also as shown by this example, and many others, there's quite a big network by each of the partners involved in that project that can really kind of, when it comes to disseminating the results or attracting other stakeholders to come in and join, there's quite a big potential. So definitely and in a way an honor to be in the same document as some of the big corporates and the European commissions and representatives and stuff like that. But yeah, even more exciting in a way as to that's not just a document. Those are actually partners within the networks of companies that we work with together on the projects, and I'm even more excited to see how that can translate from more kind of thought leadership pieces to trying to see if there's an overlap to create some good stuff together.
And speaking to that, I'm kind of meshing it with this next question. This is kind of more for Branimir, but seeing you working alongside a lot of these, big companies, and something that never gets enough attention is the EPCIS 2.0 working group. It's kind of always thrown in at the end of our conversations where Branimir is like, oh, one more thing, we have this 2.0 is amazing. It should be out soon. And I want to make sure we hit on that. And this speaks to this because how far along is this EPCIS 2.0 standard? And the reason I mix it with this last question, because I would have to assume you have some of these heavyweight companies that are part of this group. So, and I know you might not be able to say specifically, but I'm sure like the Pepsis and the Nestles of the world are part of this because they're going to be using this standard. So, so how is the EPCIS 2.0 standard coming along? And have any other big companies come forward with being part of this? Or is that even a public thing, or is it very you meet in a basement with a cloak on, you can't tell anybody who's part of the group? Like it's kind of like Fight Club. But so if you want to talk about EPCIS 2.0 and how it's coming along, and maybe even some of the members that are in there that you can speak of, would be awesome.
It's actually a very cool topic. I wanted to mention it, but when we were discussing the data marketplaces, because it's very much in line with that, because it's been a standard that's been alive in several versions, the latest official one being 1.2. Through the GS1, it's been developed really with the industry, and the industry, this is really their language. This is how they think about data, how they speak about the problems that they have. And one of the key things there is that it covers a lot of ground, a lot of different possible cases where it's important to go through the event visibility process. So, for example, the railway companies, they pay specific attention to this. There's a lot of engagement around EPCS there. And some of them are part of the working group, by the way. But when it comes to where the development of the standard has come, because this is a very traditional industry as opposed to crypto, where everything is moving at a fast pace and people are even testing in production. Like when you think of the DeFi space and this whole new meme of testing in production, it's totally contrary to that. So, for example, the EPCIS 2.0 introduces for the first time a JSON and JSON LD serialization for the data. Previously, you had XML, and XML might sound archaic. So that's one of the things. But also it specifies something like the event hash ID. So it's moving towards the direction of cryptographic proofs and generally cryptographic identity. It envisions a lot of interactions with GS1 Digital Link. And the first official public review of, because it's currently within the working group review, so it's not completely open to the public. The first official public review is going to happen at the GS1 standards, global standards event, which is in beginning of December, if I'm not mistaken. So around a month or less than a month from now. And that's basically going to take a bit longer than after the event, and then we expect the standard to be live. We are currently working with the working group on prototyping the standard. So basically that means testing if the already existing use cases can fit the new standard, if there's not a mistake somewhere within the standard. We're also proposing new features. So there's actually quite a few new features. One of the features is actually directly including sensor data. So that's something that wasn't the case before. In EPCIS 1.2, that was sort of a unknown thing at the time. You didn't have that much IoT stuff going around. So anyway, the whole point there being is that it's going to become a much more powerful standard. It's It's great to see the specifications being driven in the direction of also better specifying the services, not just the data serialization, data structure, but also what are the exact services, because this is literally companies in the supply chain agreeing on how their APIs are going to look like. And from the get-go, the OriginTrail node is going to support this standardized API structure. So that means someone from, let's say, maybe not the best example, but US railway company wants to find out about some parts being made in Europe. They're going to be able to, they will already know what type of query they should ask to the API, because it's a standardized one. And it's being fixed up with all the experience that's previously developed. Now, when it comes to EPCIS specifically, EPCIS envisions something called the EPCIS repository. The EPCIS repository is really a data store with these services that are standardized that a certain company owns. And then multiple such data stores or repositories can be seen or coexist in the world. What the GS1 hasn't from the get-go sort of envisioned was that there we will have this decentralized world today, but the technology was thinking of having multiple entities run some sort of data sharing, let's say, network. And that's where OriginTrail fits perfectly, because it provides not only this EPCIS standardization where everybody knows the right API, the data structure, they can understand everything, they agreed on that prior to OriginTrail even existing, but also they will get all the benefits of ODN, which is really what you said, privacy by design, decentralization, trust enhancing components, so that really something called a decentralized EPCIS repository could be very easily built on the ODN. And that's something that is actually already basically underway. So when it comes to EPCIS, as you can see, I'm very excited. It's going to be something that is going to, without it, and that's why when you say there's a lot of talk and people don't understand the round wheel versus a square wheel and so on, it's easy to get. It's always easy when you understand something. Problems are easy, but when you don't understand it, you end up trying to do things that, in my opinion, are not the right things to do. For example, you try to implement a traceability system on a public blockchain, not only because of a cost, but it's because fitting this into a smart contract is like trying to, run a computer today on a calculator chip.
On a toaster.
You can do it, but it's gonna cause all kinds of problems, and there's a lot of these problems have already been solved in many other ways. You're just trying to apply the wrong solution to the problem. And blockchain by itself is not the solution, but it's a component of the solution. That's why ODN is so heavily involved within the standards communities, because that's really what is needed for data sharing. Like Žiga said, the bad data problem is not tackled only by providing integrity to it. That's a component, but the structure and the availability is also very important, and you won't solve availability with blockchain. Blockchain actually goes contrary to that. If you want to put a public piece of data, a piece of private data on a public network, it just doesn't fit. It's a cube through the round hole, right? So
what's crazy to me, and I'm just going to kind of recap what you talked about, because this is how I mentally process this, and I want other people to understand this as well. So you have this new standard coming out that at some point, everything's pretty much going to have to follow within the supply chain. You have Branimir, probably the only blockchain guy even sitting in this working group alongside Fortune 500 companies who are still using barcode 1.0. And you're advising the best way to move forward with these EPCIS 2.0 standards. The ODN out of the box is going to support all of these EPCIS 2.0 standards alongside all these companies you're working with who are going to know the ODN supports all these EPCIS 2.0 standards. And so when it's time to go live or pull a trigger, it seems to me that there's going to be a great first path at least to go down and say, this is how we start at least absorbing this. This is how we start using this. And then from there, it's probably a balloon effect. Again, I'm going to use the round wheel thing. It's like all these car manufacturers talking about designing cars, and OriginTrail's building the wheel, and they're all at the same meeting together wondering how they're going to make this car move down the street. It's like, all right, well, here's the wheels, you can put them on all your different cars out there, and we helped develop the standard with you guys, so we know that they work. So it's mind-boggling when you think about that, and I want people to understand the scale of this, that the seat you have at the table, you must be like the weirdest guy at these meetings, because these people are probably in like 20-year-old logic. And here you got this guy talking about decentralized knowledge graphs with blockchains and hashing proofs. And they must be like, this sounds great, man. I don't know what you're talking about, but it sounds amazing. And if it lets us share public and private data seamlessly without trusting anybody, we're on board. Did I put an accurate overall general description of what I see the EPCIS 2.0 working group being like?
Yeah, you got it pretty much within the ballpark. I mean, it's when you speak with anyone really, I mean, we're speaking in English right now. That's literally the standard, I guess, at least in the Western world. It's common. So that means, well, anybody wants to do business or communicate needs to do it. In the technical terms, that's what standards do. If you want to do something, you need that. It's absolutely necessary. So there's a natural gravity pulling people towards these standards, but also there's they provide the common sort of terms, the terminology, the taxonomy, if you might say. So if you go and speak with someone, like you said, from a more traditional industry, and you start telling them about hashes and consensus and stuff, you lose them. But you can speak EPCS to them because they understand that. And once you introduce element by element, like for example, this event hash ID that's going to be introduced, they understand because it applies as a solution to a problem that they always observed. They might not have observed within what they do on a day-to-day basis that centralization is a problem. Maybe for them that's like, oh, decentralization, cool thing, Bitcoin, I like the idea, but how do I track my
relate
that with it? And then you realize, okay, this is a tool that's not supposed to change this previous tool that you're using. It's supposed to enhance it, and you're only going to enhance it if you understand how. And that's really the usability aspect of Trace Labs. We tend to, when we speak about data marketplaces, there's many ways you can implement a data marketplace, both in the centralized and in the decentralized way. And it comes down to efficiency, like how efficient this software is, how costly it is. But if you don't hit the nail on the head at the beginning and understand what these people really need, how they're going to exchange this data, and that's why we work with all these projects, like Tomaž mentioned, the FDM, the LDM, the NGI Atlantic. You're probably going to build something, but they will never come. So in that sense, it's very similar to EPCS. It's a community that exists for a very long time. It has a significant adoption, and there's no, in terms of supply chains, GS1 is the prime community when you want to discuss on how something is going to be handled in the future. And they specify a lot of different standards. So if there's something that's going to be sort of a top at the top of the solution list for someone to use, it's going to be something that speaks the common language, like English, right? Standards. And ideally, that's going to be open source. So then everybody can contribute and everybody can take it, and it's free. It's not a proprietary solution. So in that sense, OriginTrail has both. And its additional components is that it envisions that there is no middle person. Even GS1 is not the middle entity that's going to broker something. It's actually going to be fully decentralized. That's why it's in a unique position to become one of the key implementations for such systems, which you can use it as the underlying technologies. But I speak too much about EPCS, I guess.
No, I wanted to give you a good. I wanted you to really talk about it because I feel like we don't address it enough, and I know you're really passionate about it, and I know it has a lot to do with what the ODN's being built around and where it's going. So I'm glad we did kind of get that out there because I don't know, from my point of view, it sounds like you guys are at the front seat of the table of all these big industries that are going to be using the technology, using these standards, and you guys are the first option for them to go to. So, and you don't even have to speak to that. That's just how I see it. So.
Yeah, just want to point out the importance of the OriginTrail and why we interact with GS1 standards. 3 years ago, 2017, when we got the Walmart Food Innovation Pipeline in Beijing, Walmart also presented their mango case, famous mango case. There was no talk about EPCIS, no talk about GS1 standards, and yet these standards are crucial to structure data properly, and only then you can use different decentralized solutions to bring value. Before that, any blockchain permissionless is a blockchain, is a garbage in, garbage out system. So it's not wrong to say that OriginTrail brought GS1 standards to relevance when it comes to using blockchain for supply chain purposes. We were the ones pioneering the use of GS1 standards in the context of using blockchain technology as well. And what we see now, we are actually kind of taking some of the importance that we created, OriginTrail created this importance for GS1 standards, and we have a track record to support that. We were parts of several of their conferences, public conferences, showcasing how OriginTrail is using EPCIS standard in China, in some of other projects, and now extending that. And what Branimir talked about also, the EPCIS and the importance of knowledge graph. Now we're seeing, for example, I think we didn't touch upon the Oracle demo that we launched a few days ago, a week ago. What's important there is that we can now use decentralized knowledge graph in interaction with the already existing blockchain solutions, permissionless. And so whatever some other builders of blockchain ecosystems or systems are achieving, OriginTrail decentralized knowledge graph can come as a very, very important add-on to what they're showing. And the OriginTrail decentralized knowledge graph in the context of the demo done with Oracle shows how the highest level of integrity can be add-on to the data that is then being used. So the OriginTrail is being used as a trusted oracle for permissioned systems. And this is kind of the true power of OriginTrail. And we've talked to Oracle representatives, and they do understand the value of the knowledge graph. They understand why this is important. So whatever lingo might not be very much clear to the people that we are discussing with people that might not be as technically savvy as Branimir is, the right people understand the value of the knowledge graph. And that's just something that I wanted to point out here.
Yeah, no, I think knowledge graphs, I'm starting to see them take off more. I actually just saw John Wolpert the other day, not too long ago, talking about maybe we should put a knowledge graph into baseline. I was like, well, yeah, it's pretty powerful tech. That's already kind of being done out there. So, so yeah, no, it sounds like you guys are laying the foundation for a lot of this stuff. So, it's awesome for adoption. I think it's clear where a lot of this stuff is going. So
yeah, when some speak about recipes, we speak about on trace, we speak about main dishes, and right. We will continue to do so.
That's right. Heck yeah. I'm gonna go to this question right here, which was, it was stated that come the 1st of December, OriginTrail will be affecting 3 global supply chains. We've got the first 2, but never got the third. Kakaxi, Distillery, and then question mark. Well, I think Kakaxi's kind of used with the distillery stuff, right? Because that's where some of that data is getting read from and uploaded. And but I do remember there, I think some jobs where we should, around 1st of December, we should start seeing some of the distillery stuff go live with too. Is that correct? And I don't know if you could speak to this question at all.
Yeah, sure. So that's basically the what's alluding to is the kickoff date of the NGI Atlantic project, which will be going on for 6 months. So all the updates that pertain to that will happen within this framework. Kind of the December 1st is the starting date, and then 6 months from there until the end of May, we'll be able to speak about more of the stuff that's being done with regards to the NGI Atlantic. But yeah, it was quite exciting to be able to unveil the first one even before basically the project really started. So yeah, the distillery in Ireland, Monastravan, is really quite an exciting use case for sure.
Yeah, I can't wait to be scanning those bottles of whiskey.
Well, you and me both, brother.
All right. Amos wants to know. I'm using his
Amos.
name because it makes it funnier. But will the team ever open up a U.S. branch? Asking for a friend, not me. He might want to work there. He just happens to have the exact same name and social security number that I do. So if you guys, does there come a tipping point where Trace Labs thinks they have to get a U.S. office? I know right now it's probably, especially with everything so just like at home and decentralized, it's probably not as much of a need. But do you see down the road needing some sort of physical U.S. presence?
It's definitely an interesting kind of development with regards to just physical office spaces and physical presence. I mean, you know, we're on a meeting here every month, and we're not sitting in the same place. So I'm still able to do this quite well, I'd say. So and with COVID really kind of making it a standard globally to have this type of collaboration be done online. It's just become more socially acceptable, and a lot of kind of movements have been going towards that direction. So we're kind of looking at that as well in terms of what's the core purpose of having a physical presence, what are the tasks to be done within that, and
like,
what
do you
are
gain?
yeah, and then on the other hand, what can you gain from from being able to leverage decentralized working environment, right? So how does that mean to be that you're more easily able to connect to, you know, cross-border teams, cross-continent teams? Just all of these things are. I mean, we were kind of multinational from day one, being, you know, because Brana obviously sitting in Belgrade, and then Žiga and myself were in Slovenia. So that type of collaborative approach is something that's really in our bloodstream by now. But seeing kind of the entire globe now moving towards this direction is definitely making things more interesting. And to respond to Amos, then, you know, that might it might open up even though it might decrease the requirements for the need of a physical office in the US, it might increase the potential for collaborating from someone from across the pond without having that office to be established physically. So I think that's more or less.
Yeah, I mean, you don't get an office just to say you have an office, right? I mean, that's the point of that. Spending real estate on, you know, on Wall Street just so you say you have an office on Wall Street that you don't use or something. It's silly. So yeah, no, I get it. All right, it's getting pretty late. I'm gonna close out with one more question, and this is like one of those, you know, like Zen, like, where do we see everything going kind of things. But it's like, what do you expect 2021 to look like for OriginTrail and Trace Labs? So we're getting close to the end of the year. We got about a month and a half left. I don't want to rush it too much, but so where in 2020 was the year of adoption, remember? And it has been, right? I mean, there's been some speed bumps with things that happened with Ethereum, and Starfleet chain came to existence, and so it was a blessing in disguise that we had the Ethereum thing happen, because I think it expedited the need for stuff like Starfleet chain to get worked on. But where do we see 2021 going for OriginTrail technology and for Trace Labs as a company? Where do you guys see yourselves? Where do you see adoption? Where do you everything?
The OriginTrail network, the first version was launched last year, beginning of last year, end of 2018. It marked a very important beginning of something very, very good. And this provided us with some new sets of challenges, like how do we properly implement OriginTrail decentralized network so that it brings value to the companies. So we came up with a new product that no one has ever seen, and now we had this challenge. We need to implement it, and this challenge was successfully tackled through Trace Labs being the most important, or kind of the primary agent for the adoption. And throughout 2019 and for the most of the 2020, OriginTrail has been expanding scope of what OriginTrail decentralized network can be used for, and this was done very, very successfully. So this year definitely could be marked as a year of the adoption for OriginTrail, and we might say that this year was the year of scoping, so showing in what verticals, for what purpose the value can be built using the OriginTrail decentralized network. In the next year, 2021, the scale is going to be important. And by scale, we mean that we need to help other companies, also individuals, to use the OriginTrail decentralized network and independently deepen and expand within each verticals that we have pioneered as a Trace Labs core technology developer. And this is where we kind of aim that the adoption overall is going to be the fastest. So giving other tools, giving other frameworks, giving other knowledge in order to make sure that the adoption happens at even faster pace.
Great. Anything else anyone else want to add, or I imagine you all agree with the sentiment of Žiga, but
yeah, I'd just like to add that it's a natural evolutionary step. So it's something where we need to essentially transition into the phase where there's more tools, like I mentioned, some tools from the node runner perspective, but also from the implementation side, that companies that can have an easier job utilizing the tech, because it's still something that is, has a learning curve, and the easier it gets, the more this gap becomes smaller. That's something that is going to be a focus where we see before happening, before this additional wave is there. So it's something that is very exciting, because that's part of all of the activities within the EPCIS working group is really one of those. And there's going to be more of those. That's essentially what I wanted to say.
Great. Well, it sounds like we're going to have a good Christmas coming up. So I'm pretty excited to see what Santa brings.
Well, yeah. And speaking of 2021, before the end of the year, we'll have the more information on kind of obviously the future and the next year coming up. So definitely things to get some Christmas gifts to be excited about.
I have to be careful what I say with Christmas, because I'm pretty sure you guys have like 6 Christmases and they go over. Like,
well, more gifts. There you go.
Yeah. I remember last year at one point, I'm like, oh, Christmas break. I'm like, how many Christmases do they have over there? But no, then I'm learning more and more about the rest of the world, not just my Massachusetts bubble in the United States. So, all right, guys, we had another great session. Like I said, I love them more and more. Each one. This one was I feel like it was awesome. This was a good one too. So look forward to our next open office hours, and I'll see you guys on social media.
Thank you, man. Have a great rest of the weekend.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.